So, Jim, it's just you and me talking, and all these other people have to sit there and listen to us?
I'll ask
Yeah,
questions.
but all these other people are interesting people. I mean, I saw Brian Calhoun. Who knows more about community than Brian Calhoun? What am I doing here talking about it?
Brad Hill knows a little bit about it.
Neil Dixon, like I'm lecturing Neil Dixon about community. I mean, he is running one of the best up in Canada there. Peggy Dold on community. I mean, my goodness, she is the queen of community in Nashville. I saw Ken Kaufman, legal community, no question about that. He's got it figured. Abby North, one of the best, one of my great friends. Dade Park and Lou Roberts. I could go on all day. Great crowd. Thanks for coming.
Well, speaking of community, do all those people have anything in common? Could they be members of a community that you built about 20 years ago?
Well, I doubt that I'm what they have in common, but somehow I do know them. And,
Right.
and I
Show
like
of
all
hands.
these people here.
Show of
I want to
hands.
know everyone. I don't know so many of them. I mean, look, if your name is Glow Tribe, I want to know you.
Okay, here's a quiz. Show of hands. Everyone who's a member of the Pho List, raise your hand.
Oh, I guess that's me too.
Okay,
Well, if
so-
you've ever been to a Who Knew? I've been to a Who Knew for Tom Truitt.
So
Oh,
let's
Brad
talk.
Hill. Hey, Brad Hill, you're right there next to Tom for me.
Let's talk about community for a minute, Jim. In all seriousness, folks, Jim is the curator of the Pho List. And Jim, I didn't see every hand on the screen go up, so there's a few non-members here, non-enlightened. So would you enlighten them about the Pho List as a springboard to this whole conversation?
Pho List is more than 25 years old. It's an interesting weekend because I co-founded the list with John Paris. And on Sunday night, there's going to be a celebration for John's life. He died many years ago, but we co-founded the Pho List in Los Angeles in the middle of the digital revolution, or at least the beginning of the digital revolution. And really, our goal was simple. It was really to introduce 14-year-olds to the 41-year-olds who were going to sue them, in hopes that if they got to know each other, they wouldn't, that there would be no legal trouble that followed that. I mean, John and I knew a fair number of young people who were starting sites that they saw as marketing artists or whatever, but obviously they were MP3 sites and so forth. And we knew a lot of lawyers who were preparing to sue these people. And we thought, let's bring them together and let's create something, at least over lunch on Sundays, that brings people together, dedicated to the digital delivery of art and with a focus on music and its monetization. And more than 25 years later, it's still around. Obviously, it's not as much a brunch gathering, although it is still that, but it is a listserv with thousands of people participating. So it's a cacophony of voices, that's for sure. Probably easily the best thing I ever did with my life, other than finding my wife and son.
So let me echo what Jim said. For anyone that's not on the Pho List and you're in the music industry, you're missing out on truly one of the greatest repositories of wisdom and knowledge and contacts you could ever want. And so you should hit him up in an email. Jim, put your email in the chat there. It's griffin@onehouse.com, and he will add you. Let me warn you, it's a big community with a lot of big voices. You will get a lot of email, but if you are patient, you will learn a whole lot about the music industry, because it is remarkable, the knowledge transfer that takes place on there.
Honestly, it reminds me of a newsroom bulletin board or the wire service in the newsroom. There's so much there. You have to separate the wheat from the chaff. You've got to look at subject lines. Otherwise, you're quickly overwhelmed. But you won't miss anything in the business if you're reading the list.
And it's fantastic for networking. Some of the placements that I've made have been through connections made on the Pho List. So I am eternally grateful for you and for the access to it.
Look, the Pho List is like spending 15 minutes with Brian Zisk. So there you have it.
That we could go in a lot of directions on that one.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, what a great guy, builder of community. It's why a lot of us are here. Brian and Shoshana, by the way. I don't want to leave her out. They're like a team to me. You see them moving in unison. Tom, honestly, who knew? Tell people about how you came up with Who Knew and what Who Knew represents to the Nashville and New York music communities it serves.
Well, I love telling the origins of Who Knew because it was you who dared me to do it. I was laying in a hospital bed in the summer of 2014.
Yes.
And Jim had just attended the New York Tech Meetup a couple of months earlier in New York City. Show of hands, who's been to the New York Tech Meetup?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Not so many, but the fact is, Jim was blown away by what he saw, and he challenged me to create something like that in Nashville. The New York Tech Meetup, for the uninitiated, is a glorified pitch session. Entrepreneurs, if they can get on that stage, they get 5 minutes to pitch their wares, their new website, their new app, their new whatever, and they're largely looking for investors or, you know, opportunities to do deals. I didn't want my event to be so much a pitch as much as a story. I'm on the board of directors of TEDx Nashville. I love TED Talks. And so when I launched Who Knew, it was kind of a ripoff of a TED event, really. I typically recruit 5 or 6 highly accomplished music executives and challenge them to deliver a 10 to 12 minute TED Talk about their lives, about their careers, about the ups and downs that they've endeavored. Brian Calhoun has spoken at one. Dave Park has spoken at one. I'm looking at their 2 faces right here. You know, Brian was a very early invitee and crushed it. Was remarkable. And so at the end of the day, it's all about shining a light on people who are doing interesting things and who have great ideas. And it's not a big money maker. It's never designed to be a money maker. It's designed to build community and to create networking opportunities for everyone in the industry. And so these things have been taking place for the last 5 years, mostly at City Winery in Nashville. I do one annually in New York every fall. I'm not going to do that this year, given the COVID situation. And then recently, given COVID, we've pivoted it to an online series called The Smartest People in the Room. And Jim and I are essentially setting up fireside chats for people who are really interested in doing cool stuff. Yesterday, it was Jim and Bob Lefsetz in a no holds barred, no guardrails provided, just rambling discussion about all things music. And if you listened in, you were probably fascinated with how raw it was and how, you know.
Honestly, we're not allowed to let you see the video.
Yeah, Bob didn't hold anything back. But seriously, folks, it's you know, it's all about building community. And so when Brian asked Jim and I to talk about this subject with you all, we were pleased to do it. You know, I'm always asking, well, Tom, what are you going to do with Who Knew? What is the purpose of Who Knew? And I'll admit, I don't have any world domination ideas. I'm not doing it to try to maximize revenues, which may sound appalling to you guys out there, but it's really about creating networking opportunities for people in the music industry. And if I can create a room that brings smart people like Dave Park and Brian Calhoun and Brad Hill into it and turn them loose and let them network and share wisdom, then I've won a lot more than I would money. So Jim, I think you would agree with that's the purpose of the Pho List too.
Look, money never leads you anywhere good. It certainly never led me anywhere good, but it has followed my good works. So that would be my best suggestion, is to do what you think is right and hope that the rewards follow. The world has a funny arc towards justice, and you will get your rewards. Just do the right thing, bring people together. You know, I think as a technologist, I love the Bob Metcalfe rule. It's called Metcalfe's law in technology, and that is that the value of any network is the number of users squared, meaning that each user brings value not only to themselves, but to others. And the number grows exponentially as people join a network. And so too, in real human networks, I think the same thing is true. You know, I love the idea of using technology to enable communities. I'm fascinated by mediums. So the word medium, what is a medium? In the McLuhan-esque kind of way, that the medium is the message. So I didn't know what that meant when I learned it in college. I had really no idea. I'm not sure how I even would answer such a question on a test, but I did. And now I've lived it. I've seen mediums deliver much more powerful information than the messages they carry. For example, it was much more important at a certain point in time that music be an MP3 file than not. I mean, after all, if your audience is switching to MP3 players and they are going to carry around MP3s, the medium that something is in the MP3 format carries an extraordinarily powerful message to the person who receives it. And so too with so many mediums. I'm fascinated with how we find mediums that support the communities we have. And let me just tell you a quick story. I've been researching recently and found that the Sikh community, S-I-K-H, Sikhs, the religion Sikhs, they have taken over the trucking industry in America, or at least that's their goal. And they're taking over the trucking industry around the world. They're bringing capital, buying trucks, building repair shops, selling each other trucks, etc. And long story short, they want to stay in touch. So they thought, let's buy a radio station. And they bought some radio stations, but they found out FM stations don't reach very far. And they built an app. They said, let's build an app. Let's run it on our digital devices so we can all hear one another, at least that same radio station. But they found that digital apps weren't necessarily ubiquitous, sufficiently ubiquitous, and that not everybody could get access to unlimited data. So what they built, and they have now at, it's called a Punjabi Radio USA. There are 275,000 people at any given time who dial the same telephone number. And they hear audio in the cab of their truck or in their home or wherever, simply by using this lowest common denominator form of linking voice telephone calls. They don't take the back chat, but they deliver everybody the same audio. And I would draw an analogy there to Pho. And also to this, of course, think what you will about the Drudge Report. Lots of people read it. These are lowest common denominator mediums. You can participate on the Pho List with an Xbox. You know, it's only ASCII text that we deliver, partly to avoid pandemics of viri and so forth. But lowest common denominator interfaces deliver very, very powerful community experiences.
Hey, it looks like we have a question. Abby North, you raised your hand. What do you have to say, young lady? Can we unmute her, Shoshana?
You know, for honest to God, Glow Tribe looks like an anonymous mask right now. That
Speaking
was
of
perfect.
which, don't you have one handy there?
Which person?
I actually do. Abby North,
Abby?
her hand is up. That's
We've
for sure.
lost
Ask to unmute. I'll click that.
it. Oh, she raised her hand in case
I
you
hear
missed
her.
all
I know even a small amount of audio from Abby. I can
Hello, Jim.
identify.
Hello, Tom. How are you guys?
I think that's your stem, by the way.
Yeah.
Is your laughter. Dave Park, grab that stem, buddy. Let's get that for sale.
So I actually didn't have a question. I had raised my hand to indicate that I was part of Pho when Tom originally asked. However, I will give an incredible endorsement, an overwhelming endorsement of Pho, because the people that I've met, many of whom are actually on this event right now, I've met through Pho, and it's just been invaluable, and I do highly recommend it.
I love that word incredible, by the way. It actually means it lacks credibility, which probably is true for the average.
I never said you had credibility.
Good. You know better. I've proven otherwise many times.
Tom has credibility.
Yes, he does. He looks very distinguished, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Wherever
he
I
does.
go, people mistake him for my parole officer.
That makes perfect sense. Well, I don't want to take any more time.
Thank you for being part of the community.
Well, thank you.
Well, we'd love to hear any questions that you have because we certainly don't know it all.
I personally have a question, and that is I'm looking right at Brian Calhoun, and I want to see around that apartment he's in. He looks very comfortable, and this is a guy I got to call out for starting community. And I want to say the work he did at the beginning of Sound Exchange was masterful. He really took a can opener to the place and opened doors to people and made them feel welcome to participate in ways that I think would never have happened without his direct involvement as a community leader. So Brian Calhoun, hats off to you. Thanks for waving. We can't hear a word you say, but that's okay.
No, you can press unmute, Brian. I just unmuted you.
There we go. Thank you. Hey, thanks so much, man. And Jim, you've been just such a huge supporter and an advocate for artists. For as long as I've known you, and man, it's always appreciate you. And Tom, man, I'm appreciative of being able to participate and have had the opportunity to to present during Who Knew and attend to others. But also, I'm not sure everybody knows this, but Tom is actually the one who placed me as the executive recruiter at Sound Exchange. So thank you.
Small world.
That's right. That's right. So
what year was that?
It was 2008.
Yeah.
2008. It was 2008. Yeah. And another thing too, I give John Simpson, so much credit. He was running the organization at the time, and I appreciate his, his trust in me. And also, before I took the job, I didn't talk to a lot of people. One of the few people I did talk to about the position was Brian Zisk, and he gave me some really good advice. And one of the things that I believe that he was really adamant about was opening up the level of transparency that the organization had, and John Simpson was all about it. And one of the things that we did, to your point about building community, Jim, was, man, we sponsored the San Francisco MusicTech, and we put together lunches where I brought in people from the legal team, from like data management team, who were dealing with the ingestion of like just mountains and mountains of data. And we sat down with members of the webcasting community. And for those of you who've been in it, and a lot of people who've been in it for a long time, in 2008, we were there was the height of contention between the webcaster community and the labels. And we were able to build community by increasing the level of transparency and putting everybody in the room. And what we found was so great, that really kind of a magical that came from it, is that a lot of the webcasters who were really upset by some of the things that were happening and the requirements that Sound Exchange had, was because we needed to get the money out the door, and we had to clean up the data, and we had to make these matches in order to be able to get people paid. And the webcasters are music fans and wanted to see people getting paid. And it just really was very impactful with respect to changing the trajectory of the organization and the way people felt about it. And, so transparency and community, and, the Pho List, all of these things contributed significantly to it. And, so I'm appreciative to everybody who helped. And Jim, you've always been like a really great advocate for it, the organization, for me personally, and I'm forever grateful to you.
That's powerful testimony. I got to say, so is almost $1 billion a year distributed to artists.
That's crazy. It's so crazy.
Seriously. And I want to ask you sincerely, Brian, what do you think are the odds that this would have happened absent the statute and your work towards implementing it?
It wouldn't have happened. No way.
I mean, I say that because now, 15 years later, podcasting still has no licensing system.
Yeah, I know. I know, and I've got clients who who are doing pretty big podcasts now. Like, Questlove has a weekly podcast. Has been on for we've been on for 3 years now, 4 years maybe. And yeah, it's definitely something that's been coming up. And as more and more podcast deals get done, where, there's a lot of people about Joe Rogan getting $100 million, and people are like, all right, well, where's the money for everybody else? Where's the money for the guests? Where's the money for people who are using music in it? So that's absolutely something that is really, as the money gets bigger with these huge podcasts, people are really starting to have those conversations.
I would trust SX to monetize both podcasting and live streaming. I think it's essential that we do it. I think we need to do it sooner rather than later. Right now, we've sent the message to the podcasting community that you don't need music licensing. You don't need to use music. We'd rather not take your money until it's worth hiring 2 lawyers to argue for hours over what the rate should be. Right. I think we've really got to move on, and we've got to monetize these new mediums as they arise.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Live is absolutely another one. I mean, I think that, people have been operating sort of in the gray area and just, relying on the PRO licenses, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and the sound recordings, largely, left unmonetized. So, and I guess it sort of depends on who you ask the question to as to what rights you actually do need or exist. Actually, it's interesting. I don't know if Gary's on. Gary Greenstein and I were talking about it last week, but it is definitely something that needs to be addressed as well.
We do have an expert, and I can only see the first of the 3 screens, but I got to call out Dick Wingate, because here's a guy who's been a part of this community for a long time, absolute rock of the community, a glue that holds it together. Dick Wingate. What's your sense of community in our community and how we use technology to bring it together?
I just came into this room, so I was in the other room. I'm a little behind on what the conversation is.
Well, I'm thankful you're here, and we're talking about monetizing new mediums for a moment, and how important it is that music licensing happen.
Yeah, I did hear what Brian was saying about podcasting, which I think is absolutely vital. I'm in the process of starting an engagement with a podcast creator that's very music centric, and it's critical. And we can see now that the podcasting is a priority for all the music services, Spotify especially, but iHeartRadio and even Amazon. And this is. People are finding music through podcasts, but of course they are generally only hearing a few seconds of a song if the podcaster is sort of playing by the rules. But even that rule is unclear. So I do believe that we collectively as a community have got to. That's top of mind for me.
Unfortunately, these things end up being statutory. I hate the thought of waiting for the government to do it. And yet, if we don't wait, if the government doesn't do it, it may never happen. So I become an advocate, even though, again, I understand those of you who consider it your property, you don't want it taken, et cetera. When we work collectively, as we do with radio and webcasting and so forth, the practicalities and efficiencies call for a collective licensing approach. And frankly, I haven't seen another approach work since we've been involved with new mediums. And so, for example, even the MMA passed in the end of 2018 has a blanket license in it. So,
did you guys, before I came in the room, were you talking about stems? Someone told me that was on
yes,
the
Dave
agenda.
Park's here, and stems are in the house. And certainly this is a big step forward for music and people using music.
Well, but that's another, and I work with STEM. That's another area where it's just the Wild West in terms of rights and accounting, and ultimately that's got a long way to go before, stems are going to be a product per se. Very
interesting. Tom and I had Damian Reel on 2 shows ago. And if you don't know Damian Reel, he works at a company called Fast Case, but in his spare time, he is a lawyer and musician who did a TED Talk about basically playing all the melodies that are not registered, registering them or claiming copyright on them, and then releasing them to the public. And that he had a machine, he and a partner had a machine going at that already. And the suggestion in that conversation is that stems or melodies or small pieces of music may not be protectable at all. And
Wow.
Dave Park, I think you certainly suggested something close to that near the tail end of your conversation. It sounded like you believed that the public has a different expectation as regards its ability to use stems in creating new content. Are you unmuted? Do I have to unmute you?
Yeah, you
I've
will.
unmuted you, Dave.
I would just say that there's an appetite. I think there's an expectation about being able to express themselves with all available media. And if music wants to be, have a seat at that table, then there needs to be a disposition towards enabling the expression. And there's a whole new audience with so many of those music fans not ever having heard themselves play well before. And so stems creates a whole new opportunity to re-experience every song and every artist that they ever cared about in ways that are inherently immersive, and I think lend themselves very powerfully to interactive experiences. And so I wouldn't want to characterize that as being that any of that dilutes the rights and expectations of control that the rights holders have. Just that there's certainly a willing audience and appetite that is there for the taking, but for the sort of evolution of thinking and strategy.
Thanks, Dave. So we're just right here at the 6:30 mark, so we're going to get ready to now to transition. Do you guys have any final thoughts, Jim? Or
Hey, Tom Truitt, take us out.
Yeah, I actually had one more thing. A true proven expert on community building just popped in here. Bobby Haber of Mondo and CMJ fame has just walked into the room. Bobby, tell us a little bit about what you are doing. Well, ask to unmute. I can't unmute you. So Shauna, can you unmute Bobby Haber for a minute?
yeah, so he should click unmute in the bottom left, and then he should be good.
Bobby, you there?
Wait a minute, was Brian Zisk an apparition? There he is. He's back. Oh my God. I think teleportation is real.
Bobby, we can't hear you.
Oh, it's probably a headset issue.
Anyway, folks, Bobby Haber has relaunched Mondo New York, and he is an expert on community building. Hit him up for advice if you're trying to build communities in your own areas or your own sectors of the industry. Jim and Bobby are true proven experts.
And if anybody had attended the SF MusicTech pop-up, Brian and I had been up to New York and also participated in helping Bobby because we believe in what he's doing in New York as well. So thank you very much.
Great. How about now? Are you
Now
getting
we
me
can
now?
hear you, yes.
Oh, magic. Hey, guys.
Oh, there he is. Very good.
Bobby.
Yeah, Jim, I think the last time I saw you was in the bar of the Williamsburg Hotel, if I'm not mistaken.
That's true. Also, I was at Mondo a couple of years ago, but I haven't been since.
Yep. So, obviously it is, it's almost silly to say it's a whole new world, but we have tried to evolve pretty much overnight. And I think the community gathering aspect of it, well, the silver lining is, as Brian and Shoshana have done already, is you can now get a global audience. Always try to find that silver lining, but if you can't fly to New York, if you can't make it to Brooklyn, needless to say, you can join virtually here. And it does make for a lot of incredible opportunities. Obviously, we're all learning every minute. So that's exciting, but we're looking forward to kind of reinventing. Our hope is at least it'll be a hybrid event in October, but obviously nobody really knows what New York will be like. So we look at the guidance every day, but in the meantime, we'd like to think we're building a really robust virtual event and hope you all will join us.
Thank you.
Well, we stayed too long, but we're so thankful to you. Brian, Shoshana, great to see you